The history of the Amundsons that I'm related to came from Norway. I believe I'm third generation. Myself, my dad, my grandpa, and then his dad. So fourth generation came from Norway, and they were naturally fiddle players, playing at barn dances and house parties. Years ago, people didn't have computers and everything else, but they had a piano, and they had a banjo, and they had a fiddler. And someone would play one of those, or they might have two or three fiddlers and a couple of banjo players and an accordion player. But they would play house parties, and they would start early in the evening. They'd have a big supper together, and then they'd start playing music. And sometimes the music, they'd push the furniture aside, and sometimes the music would last till it got light. And if it happened to be a Saturday night, or say like a Friday night, they would play music till it got light, go home and do chores, and come back and play music all day Saturday. Saturday night they'd have to end it so they could get to church in the morning. But many times it was Sunday afternoons that they would go back playing again. And it was just fun, Scandinavian. I'm sure a lot of they resemble a lot of Polish tunes, and I'm sure the other Germans, Czechoslovakians, I'm sure they adopted songs back and forth and maybe changed them a little bit. But I'm speaking from a Norwegian, pure Norwegian point of view as far as music. And a lot of those people just simply enjoyed the violin. A lot of those people played the violin, some better than others. And the youngsters would stand there and think, gosh, I'd sure love to play. And so pretty soon they dig Grandpa's violin out, being a full size at 4, 5, 6 years old, and begin to play the violin by instructions from Dad or an uncle or an aunt or grandma or someone. And nowadays they have instruments for students to start on way down to a 1/64th. And a 1/64th violin is about that long. Then it goes 32nd, 16th, 8th. There is a 10th, then a quarter, then a half, and 3/4, then full size. So nowadays the youngsters get a chance to start on something smaller. But I don't know of anybody that ended up with brain damage starting on Grandpa's full-size violin and stretching their arms and playing their first tunes. By the time they were 10, they could stand up there and play with their dad or their grandpa or somebody until it was a reasonable quitting time for them and they would go to bed. The other great memory that I have of that sort of thing is that lots of times there weren't rules as far as when you go to bed. It wasn't a school day, and so you could run and play, and the floor that they sprinkled this special salt or something on to make it slippery. Sometimes oatmeal, sometimes cornmeal, but that was slippery. So you could run in your socks with your shoes off and slide on that, slide on your knees and so on. And sometimes if you were brave enough, you would ask a girl cousin or a neighbor girl to dance, and you learned the waltz and the polka and the scharish and the spring dance. That's just a fancier polka. And you would have a lot of fun, and sometimes there was no place, many times there was no place to hang the coats in the wintertime, so the coats were piled in a corner. And guess where the children fell asleep? They'd all just kind of curl up on those coats, and without doubt, somebody ended up sticking their arm into a sleeve that was wet. Somebody had an accident, and but it was accepted. And many times us kids would run and play and slide till 12, 1, 2 in the morning. And there was our parents enjoying a beer or an alcoholic beverage and playing music and not tending to us children other than making us behave. They told us to have fun, but you got to behave, don't hurt each other. Nowadays they'd be thrown in jail, I think, for having a house party, and children are running around and there's alcoholic beverages. I don't ever remember any of my relatives getting drunk and falling down and being ridiculous, but they enjoyed an alcoholic beverage along with their music. Nowadays, if you had small children running around that were still maybe nursing on their mother and seeing alcohol being drank, and lots of fun and lots of dancing, lots of good time, and then fall asleep on a pad of coats or clothing, I think the parents would probably receive a citation or go to jail. From that, my grandpa and dad were barn builders and house builders and farmers. And because they were handy with wood, especially my grandpa, making things, people would come to him with their fiddle and say, "Hey, my fiddle is broken or it needs repairs. I would like you to see what you can do with it, Carl." Well, then my dad caught on to that too, and my dad took it a little farther, and then I took it farther yet, to the point where I've got a retail storefront and doing business throughout the nation. At one point, for close to 20 years, I had a violin shop in Alexandria, Minnesota, and I had as many as 7 employees. And when I moved down here with heart disease, I slowed down a little bit and took on a shop. I'm the only one here other than my wife comes and helps me. And I don't have 7 employees anymore. I jumped off that treadmill. But my dad never saw what I do. He barely saw me in the very infant stages of having a mild interest in the instrument. Mm-hmm. And so he never really truly saw what I've done with this business, bring it beyond him and Carl. His name was Harris Amundson. And speaking of my dad, Harris, he played at barn dances and house parties and so on and so forth, but he started in on the fiddle contest circuit. And I think it was probably 1960 to 65, he started in performing on, anytime they had a fiddle contest, he'd go. And he did well, but it was out of Dakotas, the organization called the Red River Valley Boys. And so him and a man named Elmo Wick and several others started the Minnesota Fiddlers, Minnesota State Fiddler Association. And that is still going today. And they started a contest up in Terrace, Minnesota. It was a very, very quaint little town with a mill run by the water flowing through and so on and so forth. And they started the Terrace Mill Foundation Fiddle Contest. And so he was very, very prominent in the organization. And because he was a really, really good fiddler, and knew many, many old-time tunes, he could play Friday and Saturday night and not repeat a tune. That's how many tunes he had in his head. None of them were written down. They were all handed down. Wow. And like I say, I believe there was a mixture of Scandinavian, Swedish, Norwegian, Bohemian, German, I'm sure there was a mixture of that stuff. And so he consequently would teach. People would go to a fiddle contest and they'd say, "Hey Harris, I want a new tune. I got a contest next year, and I believe if I know a new tune, they'll probably give me a little credit for that." There never was a technical allowance for a new tune. What everybody knows, to learn a new tune and play it well at a fiddle contest, there's an accomplishment. So in the back of the judges' minds, I know it was when I was judging. I think, well, it wasn't really a 15, it was really a 16. Mm-hmm. And there was like 5 categories from 0 to 20, sometimes 0 to 10. And so these young fiddlers would come to him and learn tunes.